In December 2010, Fiji Water shut down its entire bottling operation. Production stopped. Hundreds of workers were sent home. Shipments to the United States were suspended. Retailers were left without inventory. The reason was not drought, not contamination, not mechanical failure. It was a dispute with the government of Fiji over export taxes. For a brand built entirely on a single aquifer in a remote island nation, the message was unambiguous. If access to that source disappeared, so did the company. At the time, Fiji Water was generating hundreds of millions of dollars in annual retail sales in the United States. It had become one of the fastest-growing premium bottled water brands in the country, with distribution across national grocery chains, hotels, and entertainment venues. Yet its entire global business depended on one underground water source, in one country, governed by one political system. There was no second facility in another continent, no alternative supply chain waiting in reserve. The brand's differentiation was inseparable from its geography. This is the story of how Fiji Water turned a $2 bottle into a billion-dollar brand, how geography became its competitive advantage, and how the same distance that created value nearly exposed its limits. Water is the definition of abundance. It flows through municipal systems, fills lakes and rivers, and falls freely from the sky. For most of modern retail history, bottled water was treated as a commodity. The differentiation was minimal, the margins were modest. Convenience, not prestige, drove demand. Consumers purchased it at gas stations, airports, and vending machines. Brand loyalty was weak, price sensitivity was high. By the late 1990s, the US bottled water market was expanding rapidly. Consumers were reducing soda consumption amid rising health concerns. Large beverage conglomerates increased investment. Nestlé, PepsiCo, and Coca-Cola competed on distribution scale and pricing efficiency. Shelf space was crowded, and the dominant strategy was volume. Fiji Water entered this environment in 1996 with a proposition that rejected commodity logic. It would not compete on price, it would compete on origin. The company was founded by Canadian businessman David Gilmour, who recognized that Fiji, a remote island nation in the South Pacific, possessed a protected artesian aquifer. The water was naturally filtered through volcanic rock, accumulating minerals as it moved through underground layers. But filtration was not the primary differentiator. Isolation was. Fiji is more than 5,000 miles from the US West Coast. Shipping water across that distance increases costs significantly, adding freight expenses that domestic brands avoid. That cost should have been a disadvantage. Instead, it became proof of authenticity. If it came from that far away, it must be different. The narrative was simple and consistent. Rain fell on a tropical island. It filtered underground for years. It collected in a sealed aquifer protected from pollution. It was bottled at the source, untouched by human hands. The language emphasized purity and separation from industrial systems. In a category dominated by municipal purification and generic labels, the story was distinctive. It suggested not just hydration, but escape. Not just convenience, but distance from modern contamination. Early strategy focused on placement rather than advertising volume. Fiji Water targeted high-end restaurants, boutique hotels, and entertainment venues in Los Angeles and New York. Context shaped perception. If the bottle appeared in premium environments, the price would feel justified. Consumers encountering it in luxury settings would associate it with status rather than necessity. Design reinforced the strategy. The square bottle disrupted shelf uniformity and photographed well in media settings. The label featured tropical imagery and understated typography. The aesthetic signaled refinement rather than flash. It looked composed, deliberate, different. The price remained high, often around $2 for a 500 milliliter bottle, when alternatives cost half that. The premium was intentional. Discounting would dilute the signal. Price itself became part of the marketing. By the mid-2000s, the brand gained visibility through strategic placement at award shows and fashion events. Photographs circulated globally. The square bottle appeared on tables during televised ceremonies. The exposure functioned as silent endorsement. In 2008, Fiji Water was acquired by Stuart and Linda Resnick's Wonderful Company. The Resnicks had experience scaling agricultural brands globally, including pistachios and citrus. Under their ownership, distribution expanded aggressively across retail chains, while premium positioning was preserved. The brand entered mainstream supermarkets without abandoning its high-end identity. Retail sales climbed into the hundreds of millions annually. Industry estimates suggested Fiji Water captured a meaningful share of the premium bottled water segment in the United States, competing with brands like Evian, Smartwater, and Voss. Premium water margins were significantly higher than standard purified brands, creating attractive economics if positioning held. But growth intensified scrutiny. In 2007, Fiji Water launched a marketing campaign claiming it was carbon negative. Environmental groups challenged the methodology behind the offsets. Critics pointed to the emissions involved in transporting heavy bottles across the Pacific Ocean and questioned whether offset projects fully compensated for the environmental impact. The company adjusted its messaging and invested in renewable energy projects at its bottling facility, but the criticism lingered. The scrutiny revealed an uncomfortable reality. The brand's defining strength, its remoteness, also magnified environmental concerns. The same distance that signaled purity also signaled fuel consumption. Then came the 2010 tax dispute. The Fijian government announced a significant increase in export taxes on bottled water. The move directly targeted Fiji Water, which by then represented a substantial portion of the nation's bottled water exports and was one of the country's largest private employers. Reports suggested bottled water exports accounted for a meaningful share of Fiji's export economy. Fiji Water responded by halting production entirely. The shutdown was immediate. Workers were laid off. Public statements were issued. The company argued that the new tax structure was unsustainable and would damage local employment. For several days, uncertainty dominated. Retail partners in the United States faced potential shortages. The dispute escalated publicly, highlighting the imbalance between a multinational consumer brand and a small island government. Each depended on the other. Fiji Water relied on the aquifer. Fiji's economy relied on the export revenue and employment. The conflict underscored a structural reality. Fiji Water had concentrated operational risk in a single jurisdiction. If negotiations had failed, relocation would have invalidated the brand's core promise. The label could not simply read Fiji if production moved elsewhere. Negotiations resumed. Production restarted after an agreement was reached. The crisis passed, but the episode exposed how tightly the brand was tethered to political stability and regulatory goodwill. Despite the disruption, sales continued to grow. By 2016, bottled water surpassed soda as the most consumed beverage in the United States by volume. Premium water benefited from broader wellness trends. Consumers increasingly associated hydration with health, fitness, and lifestyle branding. Fiji Water's positioning aligned with that shift. It was not merely hydration, it was elevated hydration, presented as a small daily luxury, yet structural risks persisted. Unlike technology products, bottled water offers limited innovation cycles. There is no annual upgrade, no software update, no performance breakthrough. Growth depends on maintaining perception, protecting distribution, and defending price integrity. Economic cycles introduced another layer of vulnerability. During recessions or inflationary periods, discretionary spending tightens. While bottled water itself may remain stable, premium bottled water faces substitution risk. Consumers can trade down to cheaper brands or return to tap water. Fiji's premium pricing depends on continued belief in differentiation. Meanwhile, competition intensified. Major beverage conglomerates invested heavily in premium offerings with scientific narratives. Smartwater emphasized vapor distillation. Essentia highlighted ionization and pH balance. Competitors claimed technical superiority. Fiji stayed with geography. Place is harder to replicate than process, but place is also harder to protect. Environmental activism intensified throughout the 2000s and 10s and early 2000s and 20s. Governments considered restrictions on single-use plastics. Public discourse increasingly questioned the ethics of bottled water consumption in regions with safe municipal supplies. The optics of shipping water thousands of miles became more complex. Fiji Water responded with sustainability initiatives, including increasing recycled plastic content and investing in renewable energy at its facilities. It published environmental commitments and highlighted local community programs in Fiji. These efforts aim to preserve legitimacy without altering the core supply chain model. The contradiction, however, remains structural rather than cosmetic. A brand built on transporting water across oceans will always face questions about necessity. Industry analysts estimate Fiji Water generates annual revenues in the high hundreds of millions of dollars, contributing significantly to the wonderful company's multi-billion-dollar portfolio. The brand remains one of the most recognizable premium bottled water labels in the United States, with strong distribution in both upscale and mainstream retail channels. The economics are straightforward. The water itself is inexpensive. The value resides in branding, packaging, distribution, and narrative. Fiji Water turned narrative into margin, and margin into scale. Consumers purchasing Fiji are not buying chemical differentiation measurable in laboratory tests. They are buying association with purity, isolation, and understated luxury. That association must remain credible. The paradox is clear. Water is abundant. Fiji Water is positioned as rare. The scarcity is not physical, it is psychological. And psychological scarcity is fragile. If regulatory pressures expand, if consumer sentiment shifts further against imported bottled water, if political disputes re-emerge, the brand's defining feature could once again become a constraint. Fiji Water demonstrated that even the most common commodity can be elevated through disciplined storytelling and consistent execution. It proved that geography, framed effectively, can command a premium in a crowded category: a square bottle, a distant island, a controlled narrative. The elements were simple. The execution was disciplined, but the value was never in the water itself. It was in the belief that this water was different. And as long as that belief holds, the premium holds with it. Because when you build a billion-dollar brand on a story, protecting the story becomes the real product. And stories, unlike aquifers, do not refill automatically.